Hotel housekeeper finds suspicious bag, the start of a shocking organ trafficking story. In today's video, we uncover the chilling organ trafficking stories that expose the darkest corners of the illegal organ trade. These organ trafficking stories bring to light the horrifying reality of how innocent people are exploited for profit. If you're shocked by what you're about to see, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel Stories TH for more eye-opening content that brings truth to the surface. In the heart of New York City, nestled among the hustle and bustle of towering skyscrapers, Anna Carter, a 28-year-old housekeeper at the prestigious Grand Regent Hotel, went about her daily duties. Known for her sharp eye for detail and friendly disposition, Anna had worked at the hotel for several years. But nothing had prepared her for the events that would unfold one ordinary afternoon when she was assigned to room 312, a suite recently occupied by a middle-aged businessman named Michael Thomas and his young son, Alex. As Anna approached the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the faint smell of expensive cologne that lingered in the air or the child's jacket carelessly tossed over the chair. It was a sense of urgency that permeated the room. She knew something was wrong the moment she entered. The bed had been hastily made, not at all how it would look if a family had spent the night comfortably. A full glass of water sat untouched on the table, a clear sign that the occupants had left in a rush. Something about it didn't sit right with Anna. As she began her cleaning routine, her eyes wandered, and she noticed a dark brown leather suitcase slightly ajar near the bed. It was strange. The suitcase looked out of place in such a well-kept hotel room, almost as though it had been forgotten. Anna, with her natural curiosity, bent down to inspect it more closely. As she gently pried it open, her heart skipped a beat. Inside, she didn't find clothes or personal belongings as she had expected, but rather piles of medical documents, biological charts, and hospital forms. The most alarming part? The words bone marrow transplant and urgent procedure appeared repeatedly. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. This wasn't just a forgotten suitcase, it was a Pandora's box of secrets, and she had just opened it. As her mind raced to make sense of what she had found, Anna's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from her mother's hospital. Her mother, who had been battling a serious illness for months, was weak and needed immediate treatment. Anna's heart ached as she read the message, but her mind kept returning to the suitcase. What was the connection between Michael Thomas, his son Alex, and the hospital? She felt a cold shiver run down her spine as she snapped photos of the documents, carefully documenting everything. This wasn't just a case of misplaced luggage, it was something much darker. The weight of what she had uncovered pressed down on her, and she knew she couldn't ignore it, no matter how much she wanted to. Later that day, Michael returned to the hotel. His appearance was nothing like the composed, well-dressed businessman who had checked in earlier. He was agitated, his face pale, eyes darting nervously around the lobby. As soon as he spotted Anna, he rushed toward her. "Where's the suitcase?" His voice was harsh, demanding. "Did you see it?" Anna, her pulse racing, nodded, trying to remain calm. "Yes, I found it near the bed." "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Michael's demeanor shifted. He grabbed the suitcase from her hands with alarming force and began speaking rapidly, his voice rising in pitch. "It's extremely important. You don't understand. If it's lost, the consequences could be severe." His words hung in the air, and Anna felt a chill run through her veins. His panic wasn't just about a lost suitcase, it was about something much bigger, something dangerous. Later that evening, Anna couldn't shake the unsettling feeling. What had she stumbled upon? She couldn't get the image of the medical documents out of her mind. They mentioned a bone marrow transplant, but there was no indication that Alex, the boy Michael had claimed as his son, was sick. The more Anna thought about it, the more her gut told her something was terribly wrong. Determined to get to the bottom of this, she reached out to an old friend, Jake Turner, a journalist for an online news outlet. She knew Jake had connections and could help her make sense of the document she had found. When they met at a local cafe, Anna handed over the photos of the files. Jake's face turned pale as he flipped through the images. "This isn't just some routine medical procedure, Anna," he said, his voice low. This looks like a cover-up. These documents are too specific, too detailed. And look here, he said, pointing to a name on one of the forms. Michael Thomas isn't listed as the biological father. And Alex? There's no medical reason for this transplant. We need to dig deeper. As Anna and Jake continued their investigation, they uncovered Michael's connection to a private medical group, New Horizons Medical Group. The more they dug, the clearer it became that the hospital had been involved in illegal organ trafficking, using vulnerable children like Alex as unwitting participants in a black market transplant scheme. Anna's heart sank as she realized the truth. Alex wasn't just a child caught in the middle of an adoption, he was part of a much darker plot. And Michael wasn't his real father. He was involved in something that could destroy lives, and Anna had the power to stop it. But she knew that exposing this would come at a great personal cost. Days passed, and Anna found herself in the eye of storm. As she continued to investigate, she faced constant threats and intimidation. Michael had his lawyers and contacts pressuring her to keep quiet. But the more Anna learned, the more she realized that she couldn't sit back and do nothing. She began to meet with a lawyer, Dr. Henry Reed, who had a history of exposing corruption in the medical field. With his help, Anna was able to gather more evidence, including security footage from the hotel, which showed Michael leaving the hotel with Alex in tow, no suitcase, no sign of a medical procedure, just a man and a boy walking out the door, possibly to their doom. The clock was ticking. The bone marrow transplant was scheduled for the next morning, and Anna knew she had to act quickly. She contacted the authorities, but the hospital had already started making arrangements to carry out the procedure. Anna's hand shook as she called Dr. Reed for help, her voice barely a whisper. "They're about to do it, Henry. They're going to take Alex, and there's nothing I can do." But Dr. Reed's calm, reassuring voice brought her some comfort. "Don't worry, Anna. We'll stop it. We just need to get the right people involved." The next few hours were a blur of frantic phone calls, legal wrangling, and last-minute decisions. With the help of a local news outlet, Anna was able to expose the illegal operation. The transplant was halted just hours before it was supposed to begin. Michael and his associates were arrested, and Alex was safely removed from the hospital. As the police moved in, Anna felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. She had done it. She had saved a child from a fate that no one should ever face. But as she stood there, watching the authorities take control, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The battle wasn't over. There were still so many unanswered questions. Weeks passed, and the story made headlines across the country. Anna was lauded as a hero, her bravery praised by those who had followed the case. But despite the recognition, Anna couldn't fully enjoy the victory. The fear of retaliation lingered. Her life, once so simple, had been forever changed by the events surrounding Alex and Michael Thomas. But as she sat with her mother, now recovering from her illness, Anna realized that she had made the right choice. She had stood up for what was right, and in doing so, she had changed the life of a child forever. The case ultimately led to a massive investigation into New Horizons Medical Group, and authorities were able to uncover several other illegal transplant operations. But Anna knew that not everyone had been brought to justice. There would always be more people like Michael Thomas, willing to exploit others for profit. And while the battle was over for now, Anna knew she couldn't stop fighting. The world was full of dark corners waiting to be uncovered, and she was ready to shine a light on them, no matter the cost. The room was eerily quiet as Anna Mitchell stood before the open suitcase. The faint smell of cologne still lingered in the air, an odd contrast to the sense of unease that had washed over her. She had been a housekeeper at the Hyatt Regency for years, cleaning hundreds of rooms, dealing with a myriad of different guests, but this felt different. Something wasn't right. The disarray in the room was subtle, but it was enough to stir her instincts. The bed was half-made, as though the occupants had left in a rush. A child's jacket hung carelessly over the back of a chair, and a full glass of water sat untouched on the nightstand. Anna knew that guests often left in a hurry, but this felt more intentional, as if someone had left with a purpose. As she glanced around the room, her gaze landed on the dark leather suitcase sitting near the bed. It was slightly open, the zipper not fully closed, as if the person who had packed it didn't quite have time to finish. Her pulse quickened. Why would someone leave behind something so personal, so valuable, especially in such a luxurious hotel room? It wasn't like them to forget something so important. Was it a mistake? Or had something else happened here? Anna stood still for a moment, her mind racing as she considered what to do. Her curiosity, however, got the best of her, and she couldn't stop herself from approaching the suitcase. As her fingers brushed against the leather, she felt a small twinge of hesitation, but it was quickly replaced by an overwhelming need to know what was inside. She had seen all sorts of things left behind in hotel rooms: clothes, books, even a forgotten toothbrush, but this suitcase felt different. It felt important. Slowly, Anna bent down and eased the suitcase open. The contents immediately caught her off guard. Instead of clothes or personal belongings, there were medical documents stacked neatly inside, papers filled with biological charts, hospital records, and what appeared to be an old passport. The kind of thing someone would never forget if they were in the midst of a long trip. But what really sent a chill down Anna's spine was the repeated mention of one thing: bone marrow transplant, urgent. The word seemed to leap off the page, and Anna's breath caught in her throat as she flipped through the papers. Urgent, bone marrow transplant. Her mind scrambled to make sense of it. Why would someone leave behind such sensitive documents in a hotel room? Why would anyone, especially a father and son, travel with such detailed medical information, only to forget it? The more Anna read, the more questions flooded her mind. The documents were filled with medical jargon she didn't fully understand, but one thing was clear: this was not just a standard medical procedure. This was serious. Too serious to be left behind, and too serious to be ignored. Her stomach twisted in knots as she processed what she had found. Was this a mistake? Could it be something innocuous, something related to a private, sensitive issue? Or was it part of something darker, something illegal? Her thoughts spiraled as she weighed the possibilities. She didn't have the answers, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Anna's hand trembled as she reached for her phone, her mind spinning in a haze of confusion and fear. She had no idea what she had stumbled upon, but she knew it was important. The text that came through on her phone only added to her unease. It was from her mother's hospital, the place where Anna had been tirelessly trying to balance work with the care of her ailing mother. The message was short and to the point. Anna, need another blood transfusion. I'm weak. It wasn't the first message like this. Her mother's health had been deteriorating for months, and the toll it was taking on Anna was immense. But in that moment, as she stood there with the suitcase open in front of her, her mother's condition seemed distant. The hospital message was a painful reminder of her personal struggles, but this was something she couldn't ignore. A heavy weight settled in Anna's chest. She knew she had to go to her mother, but the compulsion to investigate this suitcase further was overwhelming. As much as she wanted to just brush it off and move on with her day, Anna couldn't ignore the feeling that she had just uncovered something important, something dangerous. With a sigh, Anna set her phone aside and carefully snapped a few photos of the medical documents. She didn't fully understand what they meant, but she knew they were significant. These weren't just some misplaced papers. The words bone marrow transplant and urgent kept echoing in her mind, as if they were begging her to pay attention. Whoever had left this suitcase behind had not intended for anyone to find it. Anna felt a chill run down her spine as she thought of the person who had packed this suitcase: the father, the son, and whoever else might be involved. It wasn't just a careless mistake. The documents had been deliberately placed in the suitcase, and now Anna was the one who had to make sense of it all. She stood there for a moment, weighing her options. Part of her wanted to walk away, to leave the suitcase and its secrets behind, to focus on her mother, who needed her now more than ever. But another part of her, an instinct she couldn't quite explain, demanded that she find out the truth. If there was something wrong here, if someone's life was at stake, she couldn't turn her back. She had to know more. Just as Anna was about to tuck the phone back into her pocket, it buzzed again. This time, it was a call from her best friend, Emma. Anna hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Hey, Emma," she said, trying to keep the shakiness out of her voice. "What's up?" "Hey, I was just checking in, Emma replied. How's your mom? Is everything okay? Anna's heart tightened. She's hanging in there, but she needs another transfusion. I need to get over there soon. Her voice wavered, but she forced herself to sound calm. Anna, I know you've got a lot going on, but listen to me, Emma said, her tone serious. Have you checked on that suitcase in the room yet? I just heard from a colleague of mine. He said there's been some chatter about a missing person case involving a bone marrow transplant. Anna froze. Missing person. Bone marrow transplant. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and her mind raced. Could it be connected to what she had just discovered? Could the documents in the suitcase be related to a crime? Are you serious? Anna asked, her voice trembling now. I found these medical records. It says something about an urgent transplant. I didn't know what to make of it, but this is all too much. Listen to me carefully, Anna, Emma said, her voice urgent. You need to be careful. If this is connected to anything illegal, you could be putting yourself at risk. I don't know the full details, but there's something shady going on. I'll look into it and see what I can find. But you need to stay safe, okay? Anna's mind was spinning. Her heart raced as she glanced back at the suitcase. She had no idea what she had just uncovered, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was something much bigger than she had imagined. Someone was missing. Someone's life might be at risk, and she had just stumbled upon the evidence. I'll be careful, Emma, but I need to know what this is. I need to understand what's really happening, Anna replied, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. Emma didn't respond right away, but Anna could hear her friend's concern in the silence. Just be careful, okay? And don't do anything alone. Anna hung up the phone, her thoughts swirling. She looked at the suitcase one last time, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision she was about to make. She had to know the truth, but the truth could be too dangerous for her to face alone. She felt a deep sense of unease, as if she was standing on the precipice of something dark and unknown. For a moment, Anna felt the pull of fear, the fear of what could be uncovered, the fear of the unknown. But in the end, she knew what she had to do. She had to follow this thread, no matter where it led. Because if there was a life at risk, if someone was being exploited, she couldn't walk away. With that resolve, Anna took one final look at the suitcase, snapped one more picture, and put the phone in her pocket. She wasn't sure where this journey would take her, but she was certain of one thing. She had uncovered something important, and she wasn't going to stop until she figured out exactly what it was. The hotel lobby was quieter than usual when Anna returned from her brief break. The hum of the elevator as it ascended to the higher floors was the only sound breaking the silence. The day had been long, and her thoughts were still preoccupied with the suitcase she had discovered in room 512. It was hard to shake the nagging sense that she had just uncovered something much bigger than she was prepared for. She knew she couldn't ignore it, but what could she possibly do? The information inside that suitcase, the medical charts, the references to bone marrow transplants was far beyond her comprehension. But it was the urgency, the sense of something dangerous lurking beneath the surface, that made her stomach churn with worry. Anna stood behind the front desk for a while, trying to focus on her duties, but her thoughts kept wandering back to the mysterious suitcase and the man she had encountered earlier, Richard Powell. He had seemed calm enough then, but now she couldn't shake the feeling that his presence had been a facade. The more she thought about it, the more she realized she hadn't seen the man again since he left in a hurry with his son. There was something unsettling about their departure, something Anna couldn't quite put her finger on. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching the front desk. Anna looked up just as the door swung open. It was Michael Thomas, the man who had been staying in room 512. He had a hurried, frantic energy about him that immediately set Anna on edge. His eyes darted around the lobby, scanning the area as if looking for someone or perhaps trying to avoid being seen. His demeanor was tense, his hands clutched tightly together, and his breathing was shallow. Anna's heart rate quickened. She had only seen him briefly the previous day, but there was something in his eyes now that made her feel as though she was being drawn into a much darker situation than she ever expected. "Where's the suitcase?" Michael demanded, his voice sharp and panicked. There was no pleasantry in his tone, no attempt at cordiality. It was as though he was already halfway out the door, and he needed that suitcase, needed it now. Anna stiffened, her breath catching in her throat. She had been expecting him to return, but not like this. His sudden appearance was unsettling, and the forcefulness of his demand caught her off guard. His eyes were wide, and his face was flushed with a mix of anger and something else, fear. She paused, trying to keep her voice steady, though her hands shook slightly as she gripped the desk. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir," she said, her voice faltering. She had to stay calm. She couldn't let him know how much she had seen or understood. She had to lie, at least for now. Michael's eyes narrowed, a flicker of impatience flashing in them. He leaned in closer, his voice lowering to a near whisper, though the intensity of it made her stomach churn. "You know exactly what I mean," he hissed, his words heavy with an urgency that felt almost suffocating. "The suitcase, where is it? If it's lost, if it's gone, the consequences will be catastrophic. You have to understand. Do you understand me?" Anna took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had no idea what he was talking about. She hadn't even opened the suitcase after discovering it, and yet here he was, practically begging her to deny seeing anything out of the ordinary. But his panic was palpable. His words made it clear. The suitcase was important, far more important than she could have imagined. The consequences of losing it? Catastrophic? What could possibly be inside that would make him react this way? Her gut told her that something was horribly wrong. The sudden shift in his demeanor, the way his breath came in short bursts, the clenching of his hands as he stared at her, everything about this man screamed fear. He was trying to control the situation, trying to mask his panic under a veneer of authority, but it wasn't working, and it could see right through it. There was a deep sense of desperation in his eyes, and she was beginning to realize that whatever was in that suitcase was far more dangerous than she had first thought. Anna hesitated for a moment, unsure how to respond. Her instinct screamed at her to say something, anything that would get him to leave without causing a scene. But the weight of the moment, the tension in the air, made her pause. This wasn't just about a misplaced suitcase anymore. This was about something bigger, something darker. What had she stumbled upon? "I haven't seen a suitcase, Mr. Thomas," Anna said, her voice betraying a slight quiver. She could feel her heart racing, the blood pounding in her ears. She hoped he couldn't hear it. She hoped he wouldn't notice how her hands were shaking as she pretended to pull up the front desk records, focusing on the screen as if she were trying to find something helpful. Michael's gaze never wavered. His eyes were locked on hers with a piercing intensity, as if trying to read her thoughts. He stepped closer, his presence almost suffocating now, and Anna instinctively took a step back, her back pressing against the desk. "Listen to me," Michael said, his voice cold but laced with an edge of something darker. "This isn't a game. You may think it's just some forgotten luggage, but I assure you, it's not. There are people who would stop at nothing to get that suitcase back, and they'll do anything to make sure it stays hidden. You don't know what's in it, but I do. And I'm telling you right now, if it's gone, if it's lost," he paused for a moment, letting the words hang heavy in the air, "you won't like what happens next." The way he spoke sent a shiver down Anna's spine. There was a finality in his tone that made her heart race. He wasn't just worried about the suitcase. He was terrified of what would happen if it was missing. Whatever was inside was of such importance that it couldn't fall into the wrong hands. And it was clear now he was willing to do whatever it took to get it back. Anna's mind raced as she tried to process everything. She had to keep her composure. She had to stay calm. But the weight of the situation was too much, and she could feel the walls closing in. It wasn't just about a suitcase anymore. It was about something much darker, something that involved more than just Michael Thomas. It was about the contents of that suitcase and what those consequences truly meant. "I don't know what you're talking about," Anna said, her voice barely a whisper now, the words barely leaving her mouth. She felt small under his gaze, and she hated it. But she couldn't back down. She couldn't let him know that she had already found the suitcase, that she had already seen its contents. "I haven't seen anything unusual. Maybe you misplaced it." Michael didn't answer at first. He just stood there, his eyes still locked on hers, his breathing erratic, as if he were trying to suppress something inside him. The silence between them stretched on, thick with tension. Finally, he nodded, his jaw clenched. "Fine," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You'll regret this." Anna felt a chill run through her, but she stood her ground. She knew she had to keep him from knowing that she had seen what was in the suitcase. She couldn't let him realize that she had stumbled onto something so dangerous. Michael's gaze lingered for another moment, and then, without another word, he turned and stormed out of the lobby, leaving Anna alone, her heart still pounding in her chest. The weight of his words hung in the air, and Anna knew that the situation had just escalated to a level far beyond what she had ever expected. As she stood behind the desk, her hands still trembling, Anna realized that she had just crossed a line. Whatever Michael Thomas was involved in, it wasn't just business. It was something far more dangerous. And now, she was a part of it. The evening air was heavy with the weight of the city's pulse as Anna made her way to the small apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. Her steps were quicker than usual, her mind swirling with thoughts she could hardly process. She was still holding the medical documents from the mysterious suitcase she had found earlier in room 512, and now she was heading straight to her old friend Jake's place. Jake Stevens had been a journalist for years, covering high-profile cases, and Anna knew that if anyone could help her make sense of what she had found, it was him. But the documents in her hands were not something she could simply share lightly. There was a growing fear in her gut that whatever she had stumbled upon was far darker than she had anticipated. Jake's apartment was in a quiet, nondescript building, a far cry from the polished glass towers that dominated the skyline. The kind of place you could easily overlook, just like Jake himself, unassuming on the surface, but with a sharp mind beneath. Anna knocked 3 times, her heart thudding in her chest, before Jake opened the door, his face lighting up with recognition. She barely exchanged pleasantries before stepping inside, the weight of the folder she was holding almost suffocating her. "Anna, what's going on?" Jake asked, his brow furrowing as he looked at her anxious face. He gestured for her to sit on the worn-out couch across from him. "You don't look like you've had a good day." "Jake," Anna said, sitting down, her voice low and trembling, "I need your help. I found something I don't understand." She handed him the folder of medical documents, trying to steady her breathing. "This isn't just a misplaced suitcase. This is something bigger, and I'm scared I've gotten myself into something dangerous." Jake carefully opened the folder, flipping through the pages, his expression growing more serious with each document he scanned. The more he read, the quieter the room became. Anna could feel the growing tension, her own nerves fraying as the silence stretched on. "Anna," Jake finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "This isn't just a mistake. This is an illegal organ trafficking operation." He paused, looking up from the papers and meeting her gaze. "These records say that Alex is not Michael's biological son. That's not just a detail, it's a red flag. Why was the transplant planned for Alex if there was no medical reason for it? Something doesn't add up here." Anna's chest tightened as Jake's words hit her with the force of a wrecking ball. The pieces were falling into place, but they painted a picture more disturbing than she could have ever imagined. Michael Thomas had been acting strange, and now Anna understood why. The connection between Michael and the medical records, the urgent transplant, and Alex's identity, it was all part of a much larger conspiracy. The kind of conspiracy that made her blood run cold. Jake continued to go through the documents, his eyes scanning for any further information that could shed light on what they were dealing with. "This hospital, New Horizons Medical Group," Jake said, looking up from the papers. "I've heard rumors. People in the city talk about it, whispers about illegal transplants, shady practices, and disappearing patients. But nothing ever seemed concrete. No one's ever been able to pin anything on them. Until now." Anna felt her stomach churn as she listened to Jake. The New Horizons Medical Group had always been known for its luxurious facilities and high-profile clientele. But now, with the discovery of these documents, everything pointed to one thing. They were involved in something far darker than anyone had realized. This wasn't just a hospital, it was the epicenter of an underground operation. An operation that used children like Alex to harvest organs for profit. "Jake, what do we do now?" Anna asked, her voice cracking with fear. "I can't just ignore this." But what if I'm wrong? What if this is all just a misunderstanding? Jake met her gaze, his expression firm. Anna, you're not wrong. You've uncovered something huge. But the people behind this? They're powerful. You need to be careful. They'll stop at nothing to keep this hidden. And if they find out you're digging around in their business. He let the sentence hang in the air, the implication heavy and clear. You'll be in danger. Anna swallowed hard, the words settling in her chest like a stone. She had already sensed the danger, had already felt the creeping anxiety every time Michael had returned to the hotel, every time the unease grew deeper. But hearing Jake say it out loud made it real, and it terrified her. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. We have to expose this, Jake, Anna said, her voice trembling but determined. We can't let them get away with this. There are kids like Alex out there, and they'll keep doing this unless someone stops them. Jake nodded, his eyes scanning the room as though he was already thinking of the next steps. I agree, but we need evidence. This isn't just about telling the authorities. This is about making sure we have the proof to back it up. If we go to the cops now without solid evidence, they'll cover it up, or worse, they'll come after us. We need to get to the bottom of this before anyone knows what we're doing. Anna felt her heart race as she processed Jake's words. He was right, of course. She couldn't go to the police just yet. Not until she knew more. Not until they had everything in place. But the idea of sitting on this information, of allowing more children like Alex to be exploited, was unbearable. She couldn't just stand by and do nothing. We need to find out more about New Horizons Medical Group, Anna said, her mind racing with ideas. We need to get access to their records, talk to the staff, anyone who might know something. We can't just sit here waiting for someone else to do something. Jake's eyes narrowed as he thought for a moment. I have a few contacts, he said, reaching for his phone. People who might be able to help us get inside. But we'll need to be careful. This is more than just a story now. It's a fight against an entire operation that has been going on under everyone's noses for years. The people behind this won't go down without a fight. Anna nodded, feeling the weight of the situation press down on her. It was one thing to discover a conspiracy, to uncover a crime, but it was another to be the one to expose it. The stakes were higher now, too high. But she couldn't back down. Not now. Not when she had seen the truth. The next few days were a blur of planning and strategizing. Jake worked his connections, digging deeper into New Horizons Medical Group, reaching out to former employees who might have insight into what had been happening behind closed doors. Anna stayed on alert, keeping a low profile at the hotel while continuing to research anything she could find on the hospital. The more they uncovered, the more the pieces fell into place. And the more they learned, the more Anna realized how much danger she was in. Every day, she received more ominous messages, texts, phone calls, and even anonymous letters warning her to stop digging. But each threat only made her more determined. She couldn't let fear stop her. Not now. Not when the truth was so close. By the end of the week, Anna and Jake had gathered enough evidence to confirm their worst fears. The transplant scheduled for Alex was part of a larger network of illegal operations, a coordinated effort to exploit vulnerable children for organ trafficking. New Horizons Medical Group wasn't just a hospital, it was a front for a network that had been operating in the shadows, making millions off the lives of innocent children. The realization hit Anna like a punch to the gut. But she knew what she had to do. The time for hiding was over. It was time to take action. But as she looked at Jake, her heart heavy with fear and determination, she knew that exposing this conspiracy would come with a price. The threats were no longer empty words. The people behind this operation would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. And Anna knew that if she wasn't careful, the next victim could be her. But there was no turning back. She couldn't live with herself if she didn't act now. The conspiracy was out there, and it was time for someone to expose it for Alex and for all the other children who had been caught in its web. The days following Anna's discovery of the medical records were a blur of fear, anxiety, and determination. She had crossed a line, there was no going back now. The more she learned, the deeper she was drawn into the web of deception that Michael Thomas had woven. The medical documents, which seemed so innocuous at first, had turned out to be pieces of a much larger and far more dangerous puzzle. Anna knew she needed help, someone who could guide her through the treacherous waters she had found herself in. Her first thought was to contact Dr. Henry Reed, her old college professor. He had always been a figure of moral integrity in Anna's life, a man whose dedication to exposing corruption and injustice had made a lasting impression on her during her time at university. He was an expert in medical ethics, and his reputation for holding powerful institutions accountable was well known. If anyone could help her navigate this mess, it was Dr. Reed. Anna hesitated for a moment before dialing his number. She had no idea how he would respond to her call. After all, she was now entangled in something that could put them both in danger. But she had no choice. She needed answers, and she needed guidance. "Hello, Anna." Dr. Reed's voice came through the phone, warm but concerned. "It's been a while. How are you?" Anna's throat tightened as she tried to steady herself. "Dr. Reed, I need your help. It's urgent, and it's about something serious. Something I've uncovered, and I don't know who else to turn to." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "It's about a medical conspiracy involving a child and a transplant. I'm afraid it's much bigger than I ever imagined, and now I think I'm in danger." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Anna could almost hear Dr. Reed processing what she was saying. He had always been the type of person to take on the tough cases, the ones that others backed away from. But this was different. This was a child's life at stake, and the deeper she dug, the more corrupt it seemed. "Anna, meet me in my office," Dr. Reed said finally, his voice calm but resolute. "Bring everything you have. We'll figure this out together." When Anna arrived at his office later that afternoon, she was greeted with the familiar scent of old books and polished wood, a comforting reminder of her college days. Dr. Reed's office was cluttered with legal papers, medical journals, and case files stacked neatly on his desk. It was a room filled with the tools of someone who had dedicated their life to fighting for justice. Dr. Reed motioned for Anna to sit across from him, his eyes scanning her face for signs of distress. He had always been perceptive, and it didn't take long for him to notice the tension in her shoulders and the way her hands were clenched tightly in her lap. "Tell me everything, Anna," he said, his voice steady and kind. "What have you found? And don't leave anything out." Anna hesitated for only a moment before she placed the folder of documents on his desk. The sight of them, the same papers that had caused her so much anxiety, seemed to weigh heavily on her once again. She watched as Dr. Reed flipped through the pages, his eyes narrowing as he read the details of the case. The mention of a bone marrow transplant, the suspicious medical history, and the disturbing information about Alex being Michael Thomas's son, all of it was there, clear as day. This is bad, Anna," Dr. Reed said quietly, his voice tight with concern. "There's something deeply wrong here. The paperwork shows that Alex wasn't Michael's biological son, and yet he was scheduled for a transplant with no medical justification. That's illegal, and it's highly unethical. But what's more concerning is the fact that these documents have been tampered with, and the hospital involved, New Horizons Medical Group, has a very questionable reputation." Anna swallowed hard as Dr. Reed continued. "The kind of thing you've uncovered here is more than just a mistake. This is part of a much larger scheme, and it involves more people than Michael Thomas. You're dealing with a criminal organization, Anna, one that's been operating under the radar for years." The weight of his words settled over her like a blanket of ice. It was one thing to suspect that something illegal was happening. It was another to hear the words confirmed by someone as knowledgeable as Dr. Reed. Anna had known deep down that the situation was serious, but hearing the truth made everything more real. She wasn't just uncovering a case of medical malpractice. She was involved in a fight against a corrupt system that had been exploiting children for profit. "Michael Thomas is at the center of this," Dr. Reed continued, looking up from the papers. "He's connected to a network that's been trafficking organs, using vulnerable children like Alex. The hospital's name keeps coming up in whispers, and it's clear that New Horizons Medical Group is more than just a medical facility. It's a front for an illegal operation." Anna's heart raced as she listened to Dr. Reed's words. The conspiracy was larger than she had ever imagined. She had thought Michael was just an ordinary businessman, but now she realized he was a key player in something far darker. She had stumbled onto something huge, something that could bring down the people behind it. But it also meant she was now a target. How deep does this go? Anna asked, her voice trembling. How many people are involved? And what happens if we expose this? Will the authorities help? Dr. Reed leaned back in his chair, his face a mixture of determination and caution. The people behind this have power that extends beyond the medical community. They have the money, the resources, and the influence to cover up anything that threatens their operation. But that doesn't mean it's impossible to take them down. It just means we need to be smart. We need to gather more evidence, get the authorities involved, and expose the truth. Anna nodded, but doubt gnawed at her. I don't know if I can do this. I've already seen how desperate Michael is to cover his tracks. If he finds out what we're doing, her voice trailed off, the fear settling in her chest like a stone. You can do this, Dr. Reed said firmly. You've already taken the first step. But now, we need to take it to the next level. We need to expose this, but we need to be careful. The last thing we want is for them to retaliate before we have all the evidence we need. Anna felt a sense of determination stir within her. She had already come too far to turn back. The knowledge of what was happening, the knowledge of how many lives were at stake, pushed her forward. She couldn't let fear stop her now. As the conversation continued, Dr. Reed outlined a plan. They would gather more evidence, interview former employees of New Horizons, track down any patients who might have been involved in similar procedures, and build a case that would stand up in court. They would take down the people behind the organ trafficking network, piece by piece, and expose them for the criminals they were. But as the plan took shape, Anna's mind began to wander back to the gravity of the situation. She had thought she was just doing her job, cleaning hotel rooms, and going through the motions of a normal day. But now, she was fighting for justice, and the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. The consequences of exposing this scheme were enormous, and she knew that if she wasn't careful, she could lose everything. Michael Thomas wasn't the only threat she faced. The network she had uncovered was ruthless, and if they discovered what Anna was doing, there was no telling what they might do to silence her. But as the weight of the truth settled in her bones, she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when so many innocent lives were at risk. As Anna and Dr. Reed made their plans, the walls seemed to close in around her. She had stepped into a world that was both terrifying and necessary. The road ahead would be perilous, but there was no turning back. She had a mission to complete, and she was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The city was quiet, the kind of stillness that only came in the dead of night. It was an eerie calm, one that made Anna's heart race faster than the quiet beat of the clock ticking in her head. Her mind was foggy with both exhaustion and fear, but her determination pushed her forward. There was no going back now. She had crossed too many lines to retreat. What they had uncovered was too important to ignore. With Jake by her side, she was about to walk into the lion's den to face the very people who had created the network of corruption, exploitation, and illegal activity that she was determined to expose. New Horizons Medical Group loomed ahead, a towering building in the city that seemed imposing even in the darkness. Anna could feel the weight of its shadow pressing down on her as they stood before the glass doors, looking out into the dimly lit parking lot. She swallowed hard, forcing the knot in her throat to loosen, but it didn't help much. This was real. This was dangerous, and there was no turning back. Jake checked his watch and then glanced over at her, his expression hard with resolve. "We gotta be quick," he said in a low voice. "We can't afford to get caught." Anna nodded, her mind focused on the task at hand. They had been planning this moment for days, carefully strategizing how to infiltrate the hospital undetected. They knew the risks, but Anna's sense of urgency overwhelmed her. If they didn't find more evidence, if they didn't uncover the truth tonight, it could be too late. Alex's transplant was scheduled for the next morning, and she wouldn't let that happen. Not when she had the power to stop it. The two of them slipped inside through a side entrance, moving quickly and quietly, as though the very walls of the building could sense the danger. The halls of New Horizons were eerily empty at this hour, the sterile lighting casting long shadows across the floor. The faint hum of machinery in the background was the only sound as they crept deeper into the building. Anna's heart pounded in her chest, the adrenaline coursing through her veins as her footsteps echoed louder than she would have liked. Every door they passed, every corner they turned, felt like a new risk. But they couldn't afford to slow down. Jake led the way, his eyes scanning the darkened hallways. "The office should be down this corridor," he whispered, motioning to a door on their right. "We've got to find Alex's records. That's our smoking gun." Anna's breath hitched. The plan was simple: sneak into the back office, find the files, and get out before anyone noticed they were there. But nothing was ever that simple. Her skin tingled with the threat of being caught, and the tightness in her chest made her feel like she couldn't breathe. The stakes had never been higher. They reached the door at the end of the hall, and Jake pushed it open slowly, the hinges creaking in the silence. Anna flinched at the sound, but Jake gave her a reassuring glance before slipping inside. Anna followed, closely behind, her eyes scanning the dimly lit room. A large desk sat in the center, papers scattered across it haphazardly. There were shelves of files on the walls, but it was the filing cabinets that caught her eye. The heavy metal drawers, locked and secure, hiding the information they needed. Jake moved quickly to the cabinet and began rifling through the drawers. Anna's mind raced as she kept watch, her nerves on edge. They had no idea how much time they had before someone discovered they were there. Every second felt like an eternity. After a few moments, Jake pulled out a file. "Here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is it, Alex's medical records." Anna stepped forward, her hands shaking as she took the file from him. She opened it slowly, her breath catching as she scanned the contents. The documents were just as damning as she had hoped. The record showed that Alex's medical history had been altered, his transplant scheduled despite no legitimate medical need. The entries were filled with technical jargon and falsified information designed to make it appear as if the transplant was necessary. Anna's stomach turned. It was all here, the proof they needed to expose the conspiracy. But just as Anna was about to close the file, she heard it. A noise from the hallway, footsteps. The distinct sound of someone coming their way. Anna's heart stopped. "Someone's coming," she whispered, her voice tight with panic. Jake cursed under his breath. "We have to move now." He grabbed the file from Anna's hands and shoved it into his jacket pocket. Without another word, he turned and darted for the door, Anna close behind him. Her pulse was pounding in her ears, and her legs felt like they were moving through quicksand as they ran down the dark hallway, praying that the footsteps weren't getting closer. The door to the back office slammed shut behind them, and Anna's breath came in shallow gasps as they ran, trying to keep their footsteps light. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, and Anna's fear intensified. She could hear the faint murmur of voices now, and she realized that they were being watched. They were not alone. "Jake, we need to hide," Anna hissed, panic rising in her chest. She looked around desperately, trying to find somewhere to duck out of sight. Jake motioned to a small closet at the end of the hall, and without thinking, Anna followed him. They rushed inside, barely squeezing through the narrow space. The door clicked shut behind them just as the sound of footsteps rounded the corner. Anna's breath caught in her throat as she pressed herself against the wall, trying to remain as still as possible. Her skin was clammy, the cold sweat breaking out across her forehead as she strained to listen. The footsteps grew louder as they approached, and Anna could hear a voice, the unmistakable sound of someone talking on the phone. "Make sure everything's ready for tomorrow," the voice said, low and urgent. "We can't afford any mistakes. The transplant has to go smoothly. Don't let anyone mess this up." Anna's stomach lurched. The transplant, the one scheduled for Alex. It was happening tomorrow, and now they had the proof that it was all a lie. A web of deceit designed to take a child's organs and sell them for profit. The consequences of this operation were horrifying, but if they could expose the truth, they could stop it. They had to stop it. The footsteps eventually faded, and after what felt like an eternity, Anna and Jake let out a collective sigh of relief. They waited a moment longer, just to be sure, and then slowly opened the door, slipping out of the closet as quietly as they could. That was too close, Anna muttered, her voice shaky with adrenaline. "We can't keep doing this. If we're caught." Jake nodded grimly, his face pale in the dim light. "We gotta move fast. We got the evidence. Now, we get out of here and go straight to the authorities. No more waiting." Anna nodded, but a feeling of dread settled over her. They had only hours before the illegal transplant would take place. Their time was running out. They had the proof they needed, but now the hardest part lay ahead. Exposing the truth wouldn't be easy, and it certainly wouldn't be safe. But they had no choice. They crept down the hall, avoiding the security cameras and keeping to the shadows, their movements quick and quiet. Anna's heart pounded in her chest, and every corner they rounded seemed to bring more danger. She could feel the weight of the file in her hand, the information that would bring down the corrupt system. But with each step, her fear grew. The closer they got to the exit, the more she wondered if they would make it out alive. Finally, they reached the door. Anna pushed it open slowly, and for a moment, the cool night air rushed in, bringing with it a sense of freedom. But the danger wasn't over. They still had to get away before anyone realized what they had done. They had just narrowly escaped the clutches of the people behind the operation. The truth was within their grasp, but the pursuit had only just begun. The dim glow of the streetlights outside the police station did little to alleviate the cold knot of fear tightening in Anna's chest. Her hands trembled as she clutched the file of documents, now heavier than it had ever felt. The clock was ticking. Every second that passed brought Alex one step closer to a fate he didn't deserve, a fate that could only be avoided if she acted quickly enough. Anna and Jake had rushed from New Horizons Medical Group as soon as they had gathered the evidence. The stolen medical records, the documents that outlined a detailed plan for a bone marrow transplant set for the following morning, were now the key to everything. If they could get the information to the right people in time, they might be able to stop the operation and save Alex from a life-altering procedure that was not only unnecessary, but illegal. As Anna entered the police station, the weight of the world seemed to crash down on her. The fluorescent lights above flickered as they walked to the front desk, their footsteps echoing in the starkly quiet hallway. Her heart pounded in her chest, matching the rhythm of her racing thoughts. She was on edge, fully aware that the consequences of her actions could either expose a vast conspiracy or put her life in danger. The threat of retaliation from those involved in the illegal transplant operation loomed large over her, but the thought of Alex, vulnerable and unaware of the danger hanging over him, kept her moving forward. "We need to talk to someone who can help us," Jake said urgently, his voice low but laced with determination. "We've got the proof. We just need them to act fast." The officer behind the desk looked them over briefly, eyeing the file in Anna's hands before responding. "We'll need you to fill out some paperwork first." Anna bit back her frustration. "No time for paperwork," she snapped. "We have evidence of a crime about to happen. A child's life is at stake. We don't have a minute to lose." Jake placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm but calm. "Let's just explain the situation. We're not here for formalities. We need immediate action." The officer hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Hold on." He picked up the phone and dialed a number. "We've got an urgent one here," he muttered into the receiver. "A possible medical conspiracy. You'd better take a look." Anna glanced at Jake, her stomach a pit of nerves. She couldn't wait any longer. Alex's transplant was scheduled for the following morning. The clock was ticking, and she knew that time was running out. As they waited for the police to process their request, Anna's mind was consumed with thoughts of what was at stake. They had the proof, the records, the photos, the video footage. But she had no idea how the police would react. Would they take her seriously? Would they move fast enough to stop the transplant before it was too late? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, the sudden vibration making her jump. She pulled it out quickly, already knowing who it was. Dr. Henry Reed's name flashed on screen. Anna's heart skipped a beat. She had texted him earlier, asking for help, knowing that he had the legal connections to make this all move faster. But the response she received from him was not what she expected. "I got your message, Anna," Dr. Reed's text read. "But I need you to understand the risks. You're already in over your head. If you're caught, this could end badly for all of us. Do not involve the police until you're certain. I'll help you, but but I can't do it if we don't play this carefully." Anna's fingers tightened around the phone. The message was clear. The stakes were higher than ever. She had never intended for things to escalate this far, but the deeper she got, the more she realized how dangerous the situation was. The people behind this illegal transplant operation would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. The more Anna exposed, the more perilous the consequences would be. And yet, the thought of sitting back, letting Alex's life be ruined, was not an option. She couldn't live with herself if she didn't act now. Despite Dr. Reed's warning, Anna knew she couldn't wait. She wasn't backing down. Not now, not when there was a child's life hanging in the balance. The officer returned shortly, this time with a detective in tow, a tall, thin man with a serious demeanor. He introduced himself as Detective Harris. Anna quickly explained the situation to him, her words spilling out in a rush as she described the illegal transplant, the stolen medical records, and the people involved. She watched his face closely as she spoke, searching for any sign of doubt or disbelief. But to her relief, he remained calm, his eyes narrowing as he listened. "You're telling me that this operation, this transplant, is part of an illegal organ trafficking scheme?" Detective Harris asked, his voice steady but sharp. "Yes," Anna replied, nodding. "And the transplant is scheduled for tomorrow morning. We need to act fast." Harris looked at her, then at Jake, before giving a small nod. "I believe you," he said. "We'll need to get a team together, but we'll move quickly. If what you're saying is true, this is bigger than we thought. We can't let this happen." Anna's heart lifted at his words. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt like someone was actually listening, someone who could help make things right. The realization that she wasn't alone in this fight, at least not anymore, was a small but powerful comfort. Detective Harris led them to a back room, where he placed a call to coordinate with other officers. While they waited, Anna's mind raced. Time was slipping away, and the uncertainty of it all gnawed at her. What if they weren't fast enough? What if they didn't get the necessary warrants in time? The transplant was scheduled to take place first thing in the morning, and she knew that every minute that passed brought Alex closer to the procedure. The people behind this operation wouldn't hesitate to carry out the transplant and cover their tracks. They were ruthless, and Anna knew that exposing them would make her a target. Jake placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent gesture of reassurance. "We're doing the right thing," he said softly. "It'll be all right. We've got everything we need." Anna nodded, though her stomach remained in knots. She wasn't sure if everything would be all right, but she had to believe it. She had no other choice. Detective Harris returned a few minutes later, looking more serious than ever. "We got a plan," he said. "We're going to get a team together and head to the hospital. We'll need you to come with us and point out the key players. But I need you to understand this is going to get ugly. The people behind this are dangerous, and they'll fight back." Anna felt a surge of anxiety, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. "I'm not backing down," she said, her voice firm. "I'm not letting them get away with this. Not when Alex's life is on the line." As they left the police station and headed toward New Horizons Medical Group, Anna's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She had just come face to face with the terrifying reality of the situation. The people behind this operation were powerful, and they would stop at nothing to protect their scheme. But for the first time, she felt like she had the support she needed to stop them. With the police on her side, with the evidence they had gathered, she finally had a fighting chance. They arrived at the hospital, and Anna's heart was pounding in her chest. Every step she took toward the entrance felt like an eternity, and the weight of the situation threatened to overwhelm her. This was it. This was the moment where everything could change. But the fear of what could happen, of the dangers that lay ahead, still lingered in the back of her mind. But Anna knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let them take Alex. Not today. Not ever. The courtroom was packed with reporters, attorneys, and spectators, all gathered to witness what would undoubtedly be one of the most significant trials of the year. The air was thick with anticipation as Anna sat in the witness stand, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never imagined that her life would lead to a moment like this, fighting against a powerful and dangerous medical conspiracy in a court of law. But here she was, The weight of Alex's life on her shoulders, standing up to expose the truth, no matter the personal cost. The trial had been long and grueling, with hours of legal wrangling, cross-examinations, and objections from Michael's high-powered defense team. Every day had been a battle, one that took a toll on Anna's nerves and emotional state. She had seen things she never thought possible: lies, manipulation, and threats, all aimed at covering up the illegal practices that Michael Thomas and New Horizons Medical Group had been running for years. It wasn't just about saving Alex anymore. It was about bringing down the entire operation, about ensuring that no more children would be exploited for profit. But as the days stretched on, Anna had begun to question whether the victory she was so desperately fighting for was worth the emotional toll it was taking on her. The sleepless nights, the constant anxiety, and the overwhelming pressure to succeed had worn her down. She was no longer just fighting for Alex, she was fighting for herself, too. She had become entangled in a war that seemed bigger than her, and every day, the stakes grew higher. Today, however, the tide was finally turning. The defense had just rested its case, and the judge had adjourned the court for a brief recess. The lawyers on both sides were already preparing for the final arguments. Anna sat in her seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, staring down at the floor. Her mind replayed the testimony she had given earlier in the day, the truth she had so bravely revealed about Michael's role in the transplant conspiracy, the evidence she had uncovered, and the courage it had taken to stand up to the corruption. She had told her story, but now the fate of the case was in the hands of the jury. The silence in the courtroom felt deafening as Anna's thoughts drifted. She couldn't help but wonder if this victory would come at too high a price. The people behind the operation were ruthless, and even though Michael was on the verge of being arrested, Anna couldn't shake the fear that they were still out there, still watching, waiting for an opportunity to strike. She had exposed them, but what if they weren't done with her yet? What if the dangers she had faced so far were only the beginning? Anna. Jake's voice broke through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. He had been sitting beside her throughout the trial, offering his unwavering support. You did the right thing. You've given Alex a chance at a future. You've done more than most would ever dare to. Anna nodded, but didn't respond immediately. She appreciated Jake's words, but they didn't bring her the peace she desperately needed. The truth had been revealed, but at what cost? She had sacrificed so much: her peace of mind, her safety, and her sense of normalcy. Every time she thought about how close she had come to losing herself in this fight, a knot of dread twisted in her stomach. Could she ever go back to the life she once knew? The court session resumed, and Anna stood up as the judge called for order. The final arguments began, and Anna's nerves flared again. This was it. This was the moment that would decide everything. The defense team made their closing statement, attempting to discredit Anna's testimony, casting doubt on her motives and the validity of the evidence. But Anna remained focused, her thoughts sharp and unwavering. She knew the truth. She had seen it with her own eyes. When it was the prosecution's turn, Anna's lawyer stood up and addressed the court, presenting the damning evidence they had gathered. The medical records, the testimony from former employees of New Horizons, the surveillance footage, and the expert opinions, they were all laid out in front of the jury. The truth was undeniable. Michael Thomas had orchestrated an illegal transplant scheme, manipulating vulnerable families and exploiting children like Alex for his own profit. The conspiracy was exposed, and Michael's defense team could no longer deny it. As the prosecutor finished their closing statement, Anna's heart pounded in her chest. She could see Michael sitting across the courtroom, his eyes cold and distant, as if the weight of the evidence didn't faze him. His arrogance was palpable, but Anna knew that it was about to crumble. The truth was finally coming to light, and Michael's empire of deceit was about to fall. The jury filed out of the courtroom to deliberate, and the tension in the room was palpable. Anna sat back down, her mind racing with a million thoughts. What would the jury decide? Would they believe in the truth she had risked everything to expose? The minutes felt like hours as she waited, every second stretching on longer than the last. Finally, the jury returned, and the courtroom fell silent. The foreman stood, his voice steady as he read the verdict. "Guilty," he said, his words ringing through the room. Michael Thomas is found guilty of conspiracy to commit illegal organ trafficking, falsifying medical records, and endangering the welfare of a child. The weight of the verdict hit Anna like a wave, but it was a wave of relief, not joy. Justice had been served, but it felt hollow. The battle had been long, and the emotional toll was still fresh. She felt a sense of satisfaction, but it was tempered by the knowledge that the victory had come at a great cost. Michael was arrested immediately, and as the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, Anna couldn't help but feel a fleeting sense of vindication. He was going to pay for what he had done, for the lives he had destroyed, and for the people he had exploited. But Anna couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. The battle had been won, but the war wasn't over. She had exposed the truth, but the people who had been behind it all were still out there, and they weren't going to let this go quietly. As the courtroom emptied, Anna was approached by the judge, who thanked her for her courage and offered her a public award for her bravery in standing up to the corruption. The words felt distant, hollow. She smiled politely and accepted the recognition, but it didn't bring her the comfort she thought it would. The award was a token, a symbol of the victory, but it couldn't undo the fear and uncertainty that lingered in her heart. Later that night, as Anna lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of the day settled in. She had done what she set out to do. Alex's transplant had been halted, and the people responsible for the conspiracy had been brought to justice. But the fear of retaliation, the knowledge that there were still people out there who would stop at nothing to protect their interests, kept her awake. Had it all been worth it? The emotional toll, the constant fear, the danger she had put herself in, all of it was justified by the knowledge that Alex was safe, but the scars ran deep. The victory had come at a high price, and Anna wondered if she would ever truly find peace again. She had exposed the darkness, but the darkness hadn't disappeared. It was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. As the silence of the night enveloped her, Anna closed her eyes, her mind still racing. The world was a little bit brighter now, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her fight was far from over. She had brought justice to one child, but there were many more who would need someone to stand up for them. And Anna knew, deep in her bones, that she couldn't stop now. The battle for the truth would continue no matter the cost. The courtroom had emptied out hours ago, the echoes of the trial still lingering in Anna's mind like an unanswered question. The weight of what had just transpired hung heavily on her, but as she watched Alex, safe and sound, running into his biological father's arms, a small smile tugged at her lips. He was free now, his future no longer tainted by the illegal transplant that had nearly been forced upon him. But as Anna stood there, observing the father and son reunited after so much uncertainty, her smile felt bittersweet. She had won this battle, yes, but at what cost? The sun had begun to set, casting a warm golden hue over the city skyline as Anna made her way to the park near the courthouse. The soft breeze did little to soothe the knots in her stomach, which tightened with each step she took. The streets of Chicago were bustling with life, cars honking, people chatting, and the distant hum of the city's energy. It was a city that never stopped, yet for Anna, everything felt still. It felt as if she had just woken up from a long, exhausting dream, only to find that the world had moved on without her. The victory was hers, but it didn't bring her the peace she had imagined. She sat down on a bench, the cool metal against her legs grounding her as she looked out at the skyline. The vastness of it all seemed to dwarf her in that moment. She had saved Alex, pulled him from the clutches of a conspiracy that had threatened his very life. But as the light faded from the sky, so did the satisfaction of her triumph. A part of her had expected a wave of relief, a sense of closure that would wash over her after the court's verdict. But what she felt was emptiness, an unsettling, hollow feeling in her chest. Alex's safety was something Anna had fought for, something she had risked everything for. She had uncovered a dark and dangerous network. In the process, she had exposed the truth, bringing those responsible to justice. Michael Thomas was behind bars, his criminal practices laid bare for all to see. The operation had been shut down, and Alex would grow up free from the shadow of that transplant. Anna could tell herself all of that, And yet, as she sat alone in the fading light, it didn't feel like enough. She thought of the other children, the ones who hadn't been so lucky, who had already been swept up in the dangerous game that Michael and his associates had played. How many others were out there? How many vulnerable lives had been altered by the greed and corruption that had festered in the medical world? She had exposed one part of the operation, but there were more hands in the shadows, more people involved in this illegal trade. As much as she had hoped her actions would bring an end to it all, Anna knew that the fight for justice was far from over. Anna's thoughts turned inward as she gazed at the horizon, the city lights beginning to twinkle as nightfall approached. She had always been someone who believed in doing the right thing, someone who believed that standing up for the truth was worth the cost. But now, as she reflected on what it had cost her personally, she wondered if she had truly understood the magnitude of what she was getting into. The emotional toll had been severe: sleepless nights, constant worry, and the overwhelming fear that she might lose everything. Her family, her safety, her peace of mind, all of it had been placed on the line in the name of exposing the truth. She had been terrified at times, unsure of what would happen next. The threats, the intimidation, the danger of being caught, none of it had prepared her for the personal cost that came with uncovering a conspiracy of this magnitude. Anna had always believed that fighting for the greater good was worth any sacrifice. But now, as she sat alone, she wasn't sure. The burden of what she had done weighed heavily on her heart. Her phone buzzed, breaking her from her thoughts. She looked down to see a text message from Jake. "You did it. Alex is safe, and that's all that matters. You gave him a chance. We did the right thing." She stared at the message for a moment, reading the words over and over. Jake was right, of course. Alex was safe. That was the ultimate victory. And yet, the words didn't bring the comfort she expected. She had done what she set out to do, but the truth was that the victory felt incomplete. The fight had taken so much out of her, and now, with everything settled, she was left wondering if it had all been worth it. A deep sigh escaped her lips as she pocketed the phone. She wanted to believe in the worth of her actions, to feel proud of the fact that she had made a difference. But the truth was, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still left undone. The emotional scars of the battle remained, lingering beneath the surface, and she wondered how long it would take for her to truly heal. Her phone buzzed again, this time with an incoming call. It was from Dr. Henry Reed. Anna hesitated for a moment before answering. She had spoken to him earlier in the day, and while he had expressed his congratulations, there was something in his voice that hinted at a deeper conversation. She didn't know if she was ready for it, but she accepted the call anyway. "Anna," Dr. Reed's voice came through, warm and familiar. "I just wanted to check in on you. I know this has been a long journey, and I'm proud of the work you've done. But I also know that there's more to this than just the victory. How are you holding up?" Anna's throat tightened as she leaned back against the bench, staring at the glowing skyline. "It's strange, Henry. I thought I'd feel different. I thought I'd feel this overwhelming sense of relief, you know? But instead, I just feel empty. Alex is safe, and that's what matters. But the cost of getting here, I don't know if it was worth it." Dr. Reed was quiet for a moment, letting Anna's words sink in. "Understand," he said softly. "Exposing corruption and standing up for what's right is never easy. You can save one life, but you'll always be left wondering how many more are out there. And that's the price we pay for justice, Anna. The fight doesn't end when the trial is over. There will always be more work to do, more battles to fight. And the emotional toll, it never really goes away. But you've done something few people ever have the courage to do. You've saved a life. You've exposed the truth. That's what matters in the end." Anna smiled, the words of reassurance offering some comfort, but they didn't ease the heaviness in her heart. She was proud of what she had done, but the burden of it was still there, weighing on her. As she sat in the park, watching the night take over the city, she couldn't shake the feeling that her victory was still incomplete. She had fought for Alex, and she had won. But there were so many more like him out there, vulnerable and at risk. The operation may have been shut down, but the people behind it were still out there, and the consequences of their actions would echo far beyond the courtroom. The world was a much darker place than she had realized, and the fight for justice wasn't as simple as exposing one truth. It was about changing a system, a world that was broken. As she stood up from the bench, her phone buzzing again with another message from Jake, she felt a sense of resolve settle over her. The victory may have been bittersweet, but it wasn't the end. It couldn't be. There would always be more battles to fight, more lives to save, and she would be ready to face them head on. Because the one thing Anna knew for sure was that she couldn't sit back and do nothing not when there were still children like Alex in the world, waiting for someone to stand up for them. In life, standing up for what is right often comes with great personal sacrifice, but is the only way to ensure that justice prevails. Just as Anna, in her pursuit to save a child, faced countless challenges and emotional tolls, we, too, must remember that doing what is just and moral requires resilience and courage, especially in difficult times. The lessons here are profound. The journey to uncovering the truth is rarely easy, and sometimes it may feel like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. But even when the victory feels bittersweet, it is important to recognize that the impact of our actions can ripple through the lives of others, bringing hope and change. In our own lives, especially as we grow older, we may face moments where we are called to make difficult decisions, whether in our families, communities, or even within ourselves. It's crucial to remember that these challenges are opportunities to leave behind a legacy of integrity, compassion, and courage. It's never too late to stand up for what is right, to protect those who are vulnerable, and to speak the truth, no matter the cost. As we reflect on our own journey, let us find strength in the fact that our actions, big or small, can make a difference, and that even in the face of adversity, the pursuit of goodness is always worthwhile. Thank you so much for watching. If you were disturbed by these organ trafficking stories, make sure to hit like and subscribe to our channel Stories Teach. We bring you stories of truth, justice, and the fight against corruption. Stay tuned for more gripping investigations.